Good afternoon and welcome to a Euractiv debate supported by Alma Mater Europea, where we'll be discussing autonomous vehicles, full speed ahead towards sustainable and digital mobility. I'm Rome Zaidi and I'll be your host for what will be most likely a very fascinating debate. A big thank you, of course, to everyone who is joining us online, and a quick reminder that if you do have a question or a comment, don't forget to send it into our chat page along with your name and the name of the panelist that it's directed at. And I'll be picking out some of those questions for later on in the program. So, of course, get involved. Okay, so to our debate, autonomous or self-driving vehicles. Now, first things first, sorry to just disappoint everyone, but we're not talking about flying cars. I know it's really disappointing, but what we are discussing is the very real and tangible prospect of self-driving road vehicles. Now imagine it for a second, whether it's public transport or ride sharing, robot taxis, they pick us up and drop us off from A to B whilst also helping to reduce the congestion on our roads. So you could take that nap, you could eat your breakfast, catch up on perhaps a book you're reading on the early commute. So what's not to love, right? Well, here's also a fact by the WHO. Now, they say that road traffic kills almost 1.3 million people every year. So could a V perhaps be the difference? Well, the European Commission does have a strategy on connected and automated mobility, but, and it is a big but, safety is holding the charge back towards AV. There are big risks, as you would expect, in transitioning towards automation, and there are, of course, big questions over, these cars mixing with, of course, in traffic. So the question then really is, can we then move towards AV? Let's ask our experts. But first of all, we are now going to go to our keynote speaker, Mark Boris Andrzenik, who is the Slovenian Minister for Digital Transformation. Mr. Minister, please do take the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Dear friends, it is an honor to be with you here today. And I'm delighted to have an opportunity to share some thoughts with you about a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. Of course, I'm talking about Europe's vision of transportation. This vision is based on a firm belief that the future lies in electric, autonomous, and shared mobility. Today, there are over 240 million cars on European roads. At the same time, transportation costs represent the second largest area of expenditure for European households. Now, according to the OECD International Transport Forum, autonomous and shared vehicles have the potential to decrease the number of cars on our streets by 90%. Now, imagine how our streets or our lives would look like, not to mention, of course, our family budgets. And then there's this safety issue that's been already highlighted in the very beginning. As we heard, around 1.3 million people die in traffic accidents around the world every year. Now, large majority of these accidents is caused by a human error. Therefore, autonomous technology at its very best has a potential to significantly bring down that number, perhaps even to zero. Now, Europe's vision of transportation was laid out in a number of documents, most notably in the European Commission Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, as well as the strategy on connected and automated mobility. These strategies and a number of already adopted measures reflect the EU's commitment to become the world leader in fully autonomous and connected mobility systems. But we are not there yet, and this is something that needs to be said. Despite the fact that Europe's automotive industry is second to none, we have been lagging behind the US companies in the area of autonomous and electric mobility. If you look at the top 10 companies when it comes to autonomous mobility, you can only find one European. That's unacceptable. The good news is that the EU is ramping up investments in these technologies and the connectivity infrastructure supporting them. In addition to the Horizon Europe program, in which connected and automated mobility, of course, is a key priority, we also have the Connecting Europe facility, which provides financial support for the deployment of 5G corridors for experimentation and large-scale deployment of autonomous vehicles. However, since we are in the middle of a mobility revolution, there are not only technological, but also certain regulatory challenges that we need to address together. Firstly, connected and autonomous vehicles raise a number of issues around liability in the case of an accident, both when it comes to the liability of the driver as well as the software and hardware manufacturer. Secondly, connected cars will feed data to various driving-related applications. Therefore, data protection and access will become an even more important topic in the future. That's why cooperation between policymakers and industry is necessary from the very get-go. Thirdly, there is an issue of cybersecurity that is increasingly important in this, let's say, challenging times. Today, telecoms are supplying the connectivity to autonomous vehicles with the same kind of standards of network security around the EU. At the same time, intelligent road transportation system and cloud services provide the same kind of security that's mandated by the NIS directive. Now, a lot has been done in this area already, but more can and must be done to ensure cyber resilience of autonomous systems. Now, as a green and tech-savvy country located at the heart of Europe, Slovenia is passionate about contributing to the EU's mobility revolution. We proudly host UNESCO's first AI center, which develops AI-driven solutions for achieving the UN Sustainable Goals. As specialists in AI, we also have developed an AI-based driving evaluation hub that supports autonomous technologies. But no matter how ambitious we are as Slovenians or Europeans, we must understand the global nature of today's mobility space. That is why this conference is so important. Dear friends, autonomous vehicles will provide affordable mobility for everyone, giving back valuable time, unclogging our streets, and hopefully saving lives. I look forward to today's fascinating discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Slovenian Minister for Digital Transformation. So Mr. Androjanik, then, you were there talking, some very good key points there, talking about the affordability factor, the positive aspects for the environment, also talking about the negatives, cybersecurity, data protection, all these things that we really need to discuss and talk about if AV is going to be a success. But there was one thing I wanted to pick up on. You said that we're not there yet. So how far away is Europe to making that transition when it comes to, how far away are they, for example, from the US?
I think that's a great question and probably $1 billion question that nobody has the right answer to. But we have been lagging behind in terms of R&D, especially within our automotive industry. Now, we have seen certain US companies racing ahead, be it Tesla, Waymo, and many others, experimenting and already deploying certain solutions in American streets in various US states. Now, of course, this is superbly encouraging because we can see that this technology works, that it is mature enough to be deployed at a larger scale, and that can give us hope that we'll reach this self-driving revolution much sooner than expected. On the other hand, of course, we need to ensure that European companies are innovative enough to catch up. And that's why I think we've seen a lot of positive developments in the past couple of years, both when it comes to production of electric and self-driving vehicles. I think our companies are stepping up, but much more will be needed because I believe that the green transition will go hand in hand with the self-driving technology, which means that we need to do both technologies at the same time, which means that we need to invest more and we need to also put in place certain incentives at the national as well as the European level to make sure this technologies accelerate as much as possible. Now, the good thing is that some countries have been a bit ahead. We've seen great developments in this area in places like France. You already have certain testing grounds across EU where this kind of technology is being deployed. So a lot is being done, and now we need to accelerate these efforts to become number one.
Talked there about having incentives at a national level. So what are the incentives for the Slovenian government then to get companies on board with AV?
So I think broadly speaking, governments have two kinds of incentives. First is a favorable regulatory environment, and this is, I think, the number one thing. Now, it's important to know that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've seen a number of very forward-looking pieces of legislation being adopted in the US. So we should try to copy the best practices from across the pond. The second set of incentives is, of course, related to finances, meaning subsidies or tax breaks for R&D. And in this area, Slovenia is super ahead, I can say. We've implemented a number of tax exemptions and tax incentives for investments in autonomous and other R&D projects. So we are becoming in this area, as well as in a number of other areas, one of the most attractive investment destinations. We're also holding talks with a number of large auto manufacturers to make sure that we understand what they need to invest in high-tech testing centers here in Slovenia. And again, we need to be better when it comes to the regulation, and this is something that can be done at the EU level as well. But when it comes to the financial incentives, we should also be more. We should also do more. We're doing as much as we can, but of course, it's not about Slovenia, it's about the whole of Europe.
Exactly. Now, just a last question, because I know that your time is quite limited. You were talking there that Slovenia is, of course, talking to manufacturers. What about the private companies? Now, I know that you did work at Uber in another life. So, given your history with them, how on board do you think companies like Uber will be to move towards automation, and especially when Uber is a hire company that's run with human drivers? So how would you say companies like Uber would really be able to take up that challenge? Are they willing to?
I think that's a great question. And frankly, nobody knows how the future of mobility will look like. But I firmly believe that it's going to be, shared, autonomous, and electric mobility all at the same time, which means that these different technologies go very much hand in hand. Therefore, there's enough space for companies like Uber and other ride-sharing providers to basically facilitate this transition, which will not happen over time. And this is important to highlight because there's been a lot of, I would say, fears or skepticism. People were thinking that this kind of technology can get deployed literally overnight. Well, it can't. This kind of transition will last for years, if not decades. I believe that firstly, it will start in logistical sector. I think trucks will become automated sooner than private cars. So this transition will be gradual, which means that even the people that drive for a living will have plenty of time to basically adjust, retrain, and find other jobs. So I'd say that a lot of fears when it comes to self-driving technology are misplaced. But again, we need the technology that works. And I think we're very far at the moment, but we're not there yet. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we need the regulatory environment which supports this kind of technology. And then in the end, we need people's trust. And trust is super important. I can tell you, as you mentioned, I worked for Uber and I took a couple of rides with Uber self-driving cars in the US. And I can tell you from my personal experience, this was scary in the beginning. But after a couple of minutes, you become totally used to it. And in the end, I can say that you trust the technology more than yourself when you're driving. So this kind of people's trust will have to be earned. And again, this process will take time.
It will, and it's interesting there that you say that you initially were quite scared. Okay, so Mark Boris Andrzenik, Slovenian Minister of Digital Transformation, thank you so much for being part of this Euractiv debate. Thank you so much. Okay, well, they have been waiting patiently, and we will now move over to our panelists and see what they, of course, think, not only about what the Minister said, but the whole conversation surrounding AV. So let me introduce you to our panelists. And we have Gert van der Linden, Policy Officer for Sustainable and Intelligent Transport at DG Move at the European Commission. We also have Hanne Virkkunen, MEP, and member of the Industry and Transport Committees at the European Parliament. We also have Stefan Dix, the Director of EUCAR, the EU Council of Automotive R&D. We also have Johannes Springer, the Director of 5GAA, an automotive association focused on the future of mobility and transportation services. And then lastly, but not least, we have Maciej Risos, who's the researcher at Barcelona Tech University as well. So thanks to all of you for, of course, being a part of our Euractiv debate. And now to understand who these panelists are, what they do, what their arguments are, I'm now going to give them the floor for a couple of minutes. So first we'll go to Gert van der Linden from the European Commission. Please do take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mariam, and thank you also for that fantastic introduction. I heard so many things that I fully agree with, and so I will not have to repeat them. Just to say that indeed the future, and I also don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not sure when this will all materialize, but it indeed needs to be both sustainable and smart. To put that into context, we will have achieved very little if the future would all be about zero emission traffic jams. We want to be smarter, we want to tackle all challenges in transport. And I agree, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and there are many challenges, but I see them as opportunities. We know we can deal with this, but one of the key elements to success will be collaboration. This is not something that any company or any member state can achieve alone. We need to make sure that we think about how these autonomous vehicles will be used in the future and how they will improve mobility, how they will increase safety, how they will increase the inclusiveness of transport, and how we will all become better served, spend less time in traffic jams and the likes. And for that, we've been working a lot on improving the situation. I heard many comments earlier on, for example, the investment in R&D. And well, I'm glad to say that under Horizon Europe, we have created a dedicated partnership to work specifically on that. And we've earmarked €500 million of the union budget to accelerating the research and development of autonomous vehicles. This goes together with lots of continued investments through the Connecting Europe facility, which is a lot of stuff that we can do today, which will help improve safety today and still help prepare for a more automated future. And finally, one other action highlighted in the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy is we've revised the ITS directive, and we will work with member states to increase our ambition levels and get better and more accurate data available for drivers today and automated vehicles in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to Hanne Virkkunen, MEP. Please do take the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to also say that the keynote speech of the Minister Andrzenik, it was really brilliant. I think he was really outlining the most important issues to where we should focus, I think, in Europe. I have to say that personally, I'm a big fan of autonomous vehicles, and I've been a little bit disappointed that the progress haven't been so fast. 5 years ago, I was expecting that we are moving much faster towards autonomous vehicles. But of course, we know what is also the explanation for that. During the last years, because of the COVID restrictions, we have had so many challenges with the logistics and so much restrictions in transportation and free movement, so that there haven't been really, I think, appetite to invest to autonomous vehicles. But hopefully now we can boost investments in this area in Europe also. And the two main areas where I think that we need investments and where we have to focus, it's technology and of course also the infrastructure part. And like the representative from the Commission said, the tools, how we can support them in the European level, it's a Horizon Europe program, and then also Connecting Europe Facility program. These, for example, these funds we can use for these purposes. But of course, like Minister already said, the regulatory framework, I think it's the key really, that how we can boost investments and innovations in this area in European Union. And I think to where we have to pay attention now in the same time when we are boosting investments and making sure that we have good legislative framework, it's really the trust to technology, and their cybersecurity is crucial. And then we have to also discuss about the ethics, under which conditions so we are using these autonomous vehicles, and also, like it was said already, the liability requirement and sharing the responsibilities and risks here, and then also the data, of course, and it's part of the cybersecurity and part of the innovations, that who owns the data and who is processing it and who is protecting the data. I think these are very important questions to where we have to focus now in Europe to make sure that we can we can encourage investments and innovations in this field. Because like it was said already earlier, I think also that the autonomous vehicles, it's very important part also decarbonizing our transportation. And in the same time, I think because of the AI, we can also make our transport more safe in the future. So we can have more safe, more environmental friendly transport, and I think also better for the people, because in the future everybody doesn't have to own car. We can also use that kind of sharing services in the future.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much. And I can say I do not own my own car. I absolutely hate driving, so I'm all for AV. Okay, over to our next speaker. We have Stefan Dix, the Director of EU CAR, which is, of course, the EU Council of Automotive R&D. Mr. Dix, if you'd like to go forward and give us your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mariam. Yes, UCAR is the Research Association of the Automotive OEMs in Europe, and we represent, of course, the manufacturers that are investing quite a lot in R&D per year, more than 60 billion euros, and more than 11% of our workforce is working in research and R&D at the automotive industry. Now, of course, our vision is to strive for sustainable, safe, efficient and clean road transport solutions, providing freedom of mobility to all with benefits to users and the society. And the key element, as the speakers and the minister said, connected and automated vehicle technologies in the future will provide prospects to support the Vision Zero targets, to reduce transport emissions and congestion, and provide individual mobility, particularly to those that were not able to use individual mobility. So it will have a remarkable economic impact, and it will shift the design of vehicles from driver-centered development towards a mobility user-centered development. And therefore, UCAR members drive these developments and the development of the technologies already for quite some time. But I remember that more than 7 years ago, I said automation is not a sprint, it is going to be a marathon. We need a stepwise approach. We need to be very careful, and one of the key factors here is safety. Safety is the critical issue. We got to do it right. We need to do it right, and we need to improve road safety by addressing the human errors. Now, we need to consider all these safety aspects at each system level and every development stage. So from the from the design to the testing to the validation, we need to make sure that our solutions are safe to be used for the users. Now, what do we need to do concretely? We need to look at the current limitations of technologies, and we look at this in different levels. So the levels, the so-called SEE levels of automation, but I will not go into detail here. What we need to work on is being able to have to use automation for increasing the speeds. Currently, the limitation are around 40 kph, so we need to look how we can increase the speed. We need to look at the operational domains, the operational design domains, and the complexity of the traffic system that the solutions can run in, and the limiting factors of the environment, so the weather conditions, etc., etc. So all of these challenges we need to address, and we need to do this together across the industry sectors, across the research areas, not only the vehicle manufacturers, but we need to do it together with the public sector. We need to do it with the cities, with the road authorities, and we need a partnership. And Geert van der Linden from the European Commission already announced this. So this partnership for connected, cooperative and automated mobility is, of course, a wonderful opportunity to work together with all the stakeholders on these challenges and make sure that we're able in the coming years to implement automation. And I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Dix. And, you know, you bringing up their safety, that's going to be one of my first questions to all the panelists. But first of all, let's continue with our panelists and their addresses. And next we go to Maciej Wilgos from CBC Computer Vision Center, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems Department in Barcelona, Spain. Please do take the floor.
Thank you for a chance to be here and to share thoughts with you. I will be talking from the perspective of research and development a little bit as a researcher. I'm quite optimistic about the future of autonomous vehicles. Nevertheless, I see a lot of challenges related to it. The project that I'm dealing with is related to corner cases. You mentioned about safety. The panelists also mentioned about safety, and I think this is the critical component. And once we observe, for instance, the development of Tesla vehicles, the promises given by CEO of the Tesla, Elon Musk, and each year he promises that or next year will be the time when Tesla autopilot is to be like in full operation mode. But the problems with corner cases, situations which are quite rare but very critical in terms of safety, still exist. And despite addressing many of them, the new pop up. So on one hand, I'm really optimistic and see the huge benefits of introducing autonomous vehicles in our lives. But on the flip side, I keep wondering whether the problem with safety with those rare cases is like fundamental one, or is it something that we can actually gradually and quite quickly solve? So I'm looking forward to our discussion and sharing thoughts with the rest of the team.
Okay, Dr. Maciej Wilgos, thank you so much. And you also brought up safety there. So that's definitely something that, of course, a massive theme that we are going to be touching upon. And then to our last panelist, Johannes Springer, Director General at 5GAA, an automotive association, of course, focused on the future of mobility and transportation services. Please do take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Miriam, and happy to be part of this great panel today. I'm representing the automotive and the telecommunications industry. The 5G Automotive Association brings together these two industries. So all the car manufacturers, their big first-tier suppliers, the telco industry with the supplier industry, as well as the tech companies, those who are providing technology pieces, very important hardware, but also software pieces for connected and automated mobility are aligned in this global association. So we are more than 120 members around the globe. So what is our perspective on connected and automated mobility? First of all, of course, the car manufacturers are investing heavily. All the cars who are leaving today, the assembly line, they are already connected with cellular connectivity, and they can use the cellular connectivity for several purposes. And of course, the degree of automation is increased each year. We don't believe that this will be a, let's say, a disruptive approach in terms of we have, let's say, on the one hand side, manually driven, and on the other hand side, automated driven vehicles. We see an increase in gradually improving the automation degree over time, for instance, for certain specific use cases like automated valet parking, for instance, and such kind of use cases where the customer is willing to pay also for this type of degree of automation. The network operators, of course, doing also their job in terms of providing the mobile networks and the coverage for all these type of use cases alongside the roads, but also in garages and all these kind of, let's say, corner use cases where connectivity is needed to make this data exchange between the various traffic participants happen. I would like to stress, maybe also a bit leading into the discussion, 2 points which I missed a bit also in the earlier talks. So first of all, when it comes to safety, it's not only about the cars who are suffering from safety or the drivers and the passengers in the vehicles, but of course also the pedestrians and the other so-called vulnerable road users. And of course, from a telco operator perspective, these are also our customers. Of course, also clear from a society perspective, we need to take care about them. Even in the cities, there are more than 80% of the fatalities who are sitting not in the vehicle. So addressing specifically the safety needs of VRUs is from my perspective, one very important factor. And the second very important factor where regulatory systems and frameworks need to pay more attention to it is the digitalization of the road infrastructure. So we had 15 years of ITS frameworks and directives track record, and we are still facing a lot of challenges and a lot of issues to get access to this very valuable data out of the road infrastructure. And this is also a very important player, ecosystem player in this connected and automated mobility ecosystem. So digitalization of the road infrastructure, of the static, but also of the dynamic infrastructure, the traffic lights, the variable message signs, the roadwork indicators, and all these things, which are very often also creating the corner cases we have heard about. This is something we need to take attention to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that communication and what happens when that car is then on the road is really important. Okay, well, let's open up this debate then. And a quick question I'm going to throw to all the panelists. You can reply in the order in which you have, of course, spoken in one or a few words. Now, I've heard you all say safety. You've also talked about cybersecurity, regulation, etc. But in one or a few words, what would, in your opinion, is the one big factor that is really holding back self-driving cars? Mr. van der Linden, if you go first.
I think it's a challenging thing. It's a big ask. We tend to underestimate how good humans are at quickly understanding a situation and taking a decision. And I think for automated vehicles, we have, on the one hand, and duly justified, very high expectations, but it is a big ask. And I think that we wouldn't be happy. Nobody would be accepting that an automated vehicle would be as good as a human. I think the expectation is that the automated vehicle is much better than a human. And that is just a big ask. And the answer needs to be that we need to work together. So yes, there are technological challenges that we are still working on, but it needs to be a joint effort with the infrastructure. We need to have better data available, and together, over time, we will get there. But it is just a big ask.
Okay, Ms. Verkunen then. So is it a big ask? In what opinion then is the one big factor that is holding back these self-driving vehicles from being on the roads?
Yeah, I think the most important investments we have to do is for the infrastructure. I think we need very smart and modern infrastructure, transport, and also digital infrastructure, and we have to combine them. And of course, today we are also speaking about clean energy. It has to be also combined with this smart and modern infrastructure. So I think these investments are really needed. Of course, we have many testing areas already in Europe. I think most of the member states are having some kind of testing areas for autonomous vehicles, but we don't have proper infrastructure that they could be used in their bigger area yet. So I think this is the main challenge we are facing.
Okay, Stefan Dix, is infrastructure the main challenge? What would you say? Very quickly, of course.
I would agree with Gert and Hannah that the key challenge is really to make sure that we get it right. And getting it right means that we validate the safe use and the interaction with all the users. So the adoption of the technology is something, and we do that by testing at a large scale the technology and looking how the users are interacting with the vehicle, from the outside with the vehicle, and how safe the vehicles are running on a daily basis. So we need to get it right. We need to validate the safety, and we need to make sure that all stakeholders that are involved in this technology deployment are working together, not only on the research path, but as well on the regulatory actions that are needed to make it possible to deploy the technologies. And these things need to run in parallel. And that is so important now.
Okay, and then Dr. Maciej Wilgos, in your opinion, what's the biggest issue holding all of it back?
I will mention again this challenge with those rare cases, and as Johannes also mentioned, the role of pedestrians, and and as we can see that virtually all drivers, human drivers, are pedestrians. Yeah, so once we as drivers make decisions, we already have model of behavior, pedestrian behavior, because we are ones quite often. So I think the biggest challenge is like human AV interaction and addressing corner cases.
Okay, and then Mr. Springer, then just lastly, what do you think is the biggest problem or biggest issue?
Yeah, okay. So as Gert has already said, this safety is very much about decision making, to make the appropriate decisions, and decision making is about situational awareness. And what is situational awareness? If information is missing, which is relevant to interpret, to perceive a specific situation, or if the information which is relevant is simply coming too late, then appropriate decision cannot be made. And this exactly causes very often severe accidents. So to provide as much as possible information to the vehicle, to the driver, or to the automated system within the vehicle, and to make sure that this information reaches the vehicle in advance properly, so that the vehicle has enough time to react accordingly. This is, from my perspective, the most important challenge. And of course, connectivity in all these flavors plays a very important role to provide this information properly to the vehicle.
Okay, well, I hope that everyone, of course, who is watching this debate has got a real, good sense of what the problems are that are sort of stagnating us to getting to, automated vehicles on the road. Okay, I'm going to open up now the debate even further to individual questions now. And first of all, we'll go to Dr. Medjay. So, given what you say the biggest issue here is the interaction between, AI and then also the human interaction. So are you cautious or optimistic about what the future holds? Is it a really realistic ambition that we all have to have, these automated cars on the roads sometime quite soon?
I'm optimistic about it, but I'm not sure if this is like a big hurdle. Like, is it like the like paradigm change required in current AI systems? Because we have already observed like 2 AI winters. There were times like in 20th century where there was a huge expectation that AI solution will grow really fast and introduce robots quite soon, and there was a collapse. And now we still observe the quite decent progress. And the challenge is that those AV agents are quite a lot trained based on data simulation and taken from like traffic. But we as humans, we find ourselves in very different situations. We were kids. We know how kids behave. So once we drive, we can easily create a model of the kid behavior, predict that what may happen. We were like riding a bike, but those AV agents train in simulation on train or a lot of data as vehicles, they are deprived of such multi-domain information. So if you are able to incorporate this information to create more diverse simulation environments or training environments for those AV agents, I think we can progress quite fast. But if we find some obstacles on this way, I think this can take longer.
To understand what you said there, are you saying that humans can't catch up to AI, or that the AI isn't intuitive enough at this stage?
What I meant is that there is a gap. There is a gap between perception of AI and the way that people behave. And in order to bridge this gap, we'll need to introduce some other measures, which are not implemented like to its full potential yet.
Could you detail maybe some other measures that you think are important there? Just quickly before we go to another panelist.
To make AI more like friendly to humans, we need to introduce a new way of training those algorithms that would incorporate different modalities, different like different scenarios that would enable algorithms to account for humans' behavior. So, for example, once we train AV agents and we only train it based on the car behavior, maybe we could also train it also like how pedestrians will behave. So this would make it more friendly towards people. So this could be just one example of what we could do in order to maybe a little bit bridge this gap.
Okay. Well, let's pick up on your point there, Gert van der Linden from the European Commission. What do you think about what Dr. Majay just said there about, improving AI and its algorithms?
No, I fully agree with him. I think that, that explains what I meant with it's a big ask, because we're expecting an automated vehicle to think like a human. And indeed, we grew up. We are humans. We are better suited at predicting what other humans will do. Where for automated vehicles, they may have a lot more eyes, cameras, lidars than we do, and they may have better vision, but they're not as good as understanding what they're looking at. And so it is a big challenge. But linking it to what you said earlier, first of all, automated vehicles are already on our roads. And Stefan hinted at this earlier, that what we're doing today is to make sure it stays safe, is we introduce limitations. So we make sure that these automated vehicles do not enter in too complex traffic situations. We limit the speed so that they have more time to react. And we will try to make sure that they do not interact, for example, with pedestrians. We just separate them. And that means that we can keep it safe, but it also very much limits the usability of these vehicles right now. They're not ready yet to replace humans. And that means that we can also not achieve yet the dream that the minister depicted for us when he said we can reduce the fleet by 90%. Because those 10% of robotaxis will not be able to drive us to all the places where we are currently driving ourselves. So our big challenge is to overcome those limitations, make sure that we can increase the speed, that we can increase the complexity that these vehicles can be able to deal with, and so that we develop the mobility services that we need, so that these vehicles can complement existing transport, that, for example, a robotaxi picks me up at my home and drops me at the train station. And that's where we need to get. I think that it will indeed be gradual. We will tackle it one corner case at a time until we're confident that we can put vehicles on the road and deliver the mobility services that we need.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up then. What about designated lanes and say motorways? Could that be something that could be a solution? But they're not mixing with normal traffic, the human traffic.
Well, that is, of course, indeed a challenge. I mean, you put an automated vehicle into a normal traffic situation. I mean, we've all experienced it. You come to a crossing and, you just wave the other driver past. And if you look across and you see no driver in that vehicle, I'm sure that at first that will be a little bit disconcerting. And in that case, indeed, I very much agree with what Johanna said earlier. Communication is one of the tools to address that. And it is a challenge. Now, I don't think we will be able to separate automated vehicles from traditional traffic, not entirely. If we need to create a parallel road network for this to work, well, then it will not work, because we do not have the time, the space, or the resources to build such a parallel road network. So a lot of work, and again, this points to what I said earlier about collaboration. We need to work together with local authorities to discuss how we can best introduce gradually these vehicles, to get everybody to get used to them, to understand how they work, what their limitations are, how we interact with these vehicles, so that people have time to build trust, not only as passengers, but also as you encounter such vehicles when you're a pedestrian, when you're a cyclist, or when you're in your own vehicle.
Okay, so let's go to our MEP, the representative of European people. Do you think that the average population has that trust then in AV? I mean, obviously everyone is excited by the leaps and bounds of technology, but do you think, have you gotten this sense from people, perhaps your constituents, etc., that they really do want to embrace AV and to have, self-driving cars on the road?
Yeah, I think that the citizens are not really ready for that yet, because of course most of us, we haven't had the opportunity to test these autonomous vehicles yet. But for example, I know from my own member states, from where I'm coming from, Finland, I know that the people are very interested in this kind of new technologies, but like they don't trust these autonomous vehicles yet. So I think there was, in the latest opinion poll I have seen, about 50% was quite skeptical on that how safe they are. And for example, in Finland, we have some special issues here because we have very difficult winter conditions, for example, and it has been challenging for those vehicles where we have had these testing opportunities in Finland. We saw that navigation in the ice and the snow conditions, it's not so easy for these autonomous vehicles. So more research and development is, for example, needed in this area when we have winter conditions in Finland. But anyway, I think that most of the people are interested in these kind of opportunities, but of course, we know that a lot of work is still ahead of us with technology, with the research and development, and especially, I think, with the safety issues, what was mentioned here already.
Okay, right. Mr. Springer, then, just quickly before we do go to some audience, what's your take then on what you're hearing other colleagues in this debate talking about, especially when it comes to safety?
I think what I said earlier, if we are talking about automated driving, we should be careful about the narrative we are creating for automation. As I said, the fully autonomous vehicle which drives us everywhere to any place where we want to go, this is really something which would be very ambitious. But to have automated driving in limited areas, for instance, for parking at an airport, or with a limited speed, what Gert has also said, limited speed for public transport to take the bus driver out of the cost equation of the public transport organizations. That is something I'm truly believe that this will happen in a foreseeable time frame. The whole industry, also we as 5G Automotive Association, working into this direction. So we have also a quite clear vision at what time windows this will happen. And this is not 10 years away, this is about 2 to 5 years away. So I'm pretty sure that we will see these type of use cases on the road, but of course not as a, let's say, one-by-one exchange of manual driving as we see it today.
Okay, perfect. Well, now we're going to go to some audience questions. And the first one is Mr. van der Linden from the European Commission. It's from Mariana from Eurographics. And they ask, and they say that some Eurographic members have their impression that the role that public sector geodata plays or could play as a basis and supplement for the specialized data is not mentioned in the ITS package. They ask for your view on that. Please go ahead. What do you think?
Well, the ITS directive is currently being revised. The Commission adopted it on the 14th of December last year. And what we're trying to do is precisely to increase the availability of data. And I am talking about mainly public sector data. That means indeed having basic information such as speed limits, traffic circulation plans, that they are available to both human drivers today to assist them, but also for automated vehicles in the future. Because this is data that is in the hands of public authorities and that is subject to more change than one would imagine. And it is, although databases exist, also developed mainly by the private sector, it is very difficult to keep these up to date. And so increasing this availability of data, this is precisely what we're aiming for with this revision. So we are working on this. We've been working on this for quite some time, but we now need to really step up and make more data available.
Okay, Perfect. Ms. Verkunen, I'm going to come to you next with this one. We have Jakob Krupa from MLEX, and he's asking, what are the key regulatory developments you would like to see, and if they're crucial to fully unlock the benefits of autonomous vehicles? And just before I do give you the floor, looking at KPMG's index, they say the top 5 countries for AV are, of course, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, Singapore, the Netherlands, the US, Norway, and Finland. And Netherlands has the highest ranking infrastructure, Finland for AV regulation. So what are your thoughts on what Jakob Krupa has asked about regulation?
Of course, in the European level, I think it's very important that we have one common framework in Europe, that how we can really encourage innovations in these areas. And I think this current legislation, what was already mentioned, our intelligent transport services, ITS regulation, I think it's very important, and data regulation as well. And the Parliament is working currently with both of these. So I think these are very important tools, because the sharing of the data and sharing the information, it's very important for that kind of innovations like autonomous vehicles. And in the same time, when we're looking at these regulations, all the time we are also speaking about cybersecurity, that is there more we could do in the European level, also make that sure that it's also cybersecurity is also taken care in this area. And always when we speak about regulation and legislation, in the same time, we have to also look the funding part, that how we could also fund the investments in this area. Of course, most of the investments will be private investments, but we can also use public funding for that. And there, I think really the Horizon Europe program and Connecting Europe Facility program, they are, I think, the key drivers also in the European level.
Okay, Stefan Dix, you've been a little bit quiet here, so I've got a question I'm going to direct towards you. Frank asks that autonomous vehicles rely massively on electronics to meet markets, customer expectations. Don't you think that Europe needs firstly to close the gap on this issue before accelerating in the field of AV? He goes on to say, is there a compatible schedule with the European Chips Act regarding this issue, Mr. Dix? Is Mr. Dix, can you hear us? If not, I will.
I hope you can hear me. I have some connectivity issues here.
Please go ahead. We all have spotty Wi-Fi, I'm sure, and I'm sure all of our viewers watching online, our audience online, understand that there's an issue too. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, we have, of course, we rely on the information that we get from within the vehicle, so through the sensor systems, and that we are able to process in the vehicle. So it is important to make sure that we have the availability of the technologies. So that's of course an issue. But at the same time, we need to understand, even if the new technologies like artificial intelligence, how they will change the way that we think of the vehicles in the future. So because currently we look at the vehicles as a very deterministic system. We know what is going to happen and what it's used for, and in the future that might change. So we need to see how all new technologies that we will bring into the vehicle will actually affect the way that we look at how the vehicles are being regulated and how the vehicles are being looked at in terms of safety validation, as we said before. So yes, it is important to look at the electronics and at the components, but we need to work in parallel on the R&D issues that we said before to make it happen.
Okay, perfect. And then Mrs. Springer, would you also like to jump in there on that question about electronics?
Well, this is today a big challenge to get access to the chipsets. All of our car manufacturers and suppliers are suffering from getting access to that. So to strengthen also the capacity and the capabilities of Europe to produce these type of chipsets and infrastructure, which is essential for the car today, not only of the car of the future, but also today. It's definitely an important topic. Yeah. So to get access to silicon is a very important thing. But I would also mention that silicon is, of course, always, let's say, the materialization of intellectual property. So R&D, and also to spend efforts in R&D and in standardization is a very important topic. Yeah. Standardization is a key factor in connected and automated driving. It takes place around the globe, so it is not limited to only specific areas. Of course, it will come at certain regional areas first, and then will come later in other areas. The car industry is a global market, it's a global industry. So this type of standardization and investing into intellectual properties, which are then driving the global standardization, is also a very important topic in this direction.
Okay, well, staying on technology, we also have a question from George, who's basically asking and saying that Tesla and other leading companies don't use 5G. So why should they then be used for autonomous driving or autonomous vehicles? And Dr. Madje, what do you think?
I think that also in light of what Johannes mentioned, is that one approach to circumnavigate shortages and problems of components, electronic components, also in the long run, would be simplification of solutions, or maybe relying more on software side, or creating better AI algorithms that would not require that much hardware. For instance, Tesla is in favor of just camera, so they aim at creating systems that do not use lidars. So I think that this approach may help to reduce the amount of hardware. And once we, for instance, look at the evolution of computers, computers from like 40 years ago, huge machines. Now we have the same computing power in our cell phones, so which are significantly smaller. So this is one approach to on one hand make the technology more available, on the other way address this problem of hardware. Of course, this is a challenging issue, and I'm not sure if Tesla is on the right track. What they are doing, basically, they create more and more advanced environments to train AV agents using corner cases that they find, those challenges cases that they find using the huge fleet of cars they run. Those corner cases are used to improve the algorithms and retrain them. I'm not sure if this is efficient in the long run. I'm not sure about this is efficient in the short run, but I'm not sure about the long run. But I perceive this approach as a promising one. Reduction of hardware.
Right. So who would like to pick up on one specific point that was made there by Dr. Madje, that Tesla is not on the right track? I don't think that's something that Elon Musk will be happy to hear. Perhaps, Gert van der Linden, you can take the floor for that one. Is Tesla, are companies, well, let's not just stick to Tesla, but are these, companies, these big, massive multinationals, etc. Are they on the right track? We know that, of course, Apple wants to roll out a fleet. So who's making the right steps?
Oh, well, I was gonna say the same what you said earlier. Let's not focus on one specific brand or any. I'd like to stress another point. I think what the question was referring to is, can vehicles solve this in isolation? Can we look at just a single vehicle and can it deal with the driving task? And that's an understandable evolution. I mean, if you're in the business of building vehicles, then you look at your product. Can I improve that product? And it's a normal evolution. But I think that to make real progress and to tackle the most challenging situations, the most complex traffic situations, we will need to look at vehicles as a system. We will need to have vehicles working together, and we need to have vehicles working together with the infrastructure. Now, that of course introduces a different set of challenges, because that means you need to cooperate, you need to rely on other people. We heard, for example, correctly so, the availability of data. What is the point in having a connected vehicle if he has nobody to talk to? So it creates new challenges, but it creates also new opportunities. Because when you look at vehicles as a system, not only can it help create the situational awareness, that I think it was Johannes who referred to that earlier, and it will help vehicles to understand their environment in ways that you cannot do simply with sensors, because it doesn't matter how many you add, you're always limited by the line of sight. And the second big opportunity that cooperation introduces is that vehicles could start talking to each other. They could agree on how to, for example, execute certain maneuvers. Think about in the future, you would have highly automated vehicles, and they have such reliable sensors that they're driving much closer to each other than humans would. And now imagine another vehicle wants to enter the highway. There simply won't be any space for it. So without communication, how will these vehicles arrange that? How will they create the space for their colleague to join the ride? So I think that is the real challenge. We need to go from looking at vehicles as an individual vehicle on its own and looking at more at system level.
That's a really interesting point to have made there, and I'm sure everyone will have understood that example very concretely. Stefan Dix, you wanted to comment as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should look at this from a neutral perspective when it comes to the technology. So we don't want to look at is it 5G? Is it a camera system? Is it a LiDAR system? We look at it at what the technology need to be able to process and then act on. So understanding the environment, understanding the traffic situation, and then making the right choices. I think that is important. And for all of that, we need to understand what are the framework conditions, what are the standards of how we interact with the other vehicles, with the other traffic participants. And if we get that right, and if we're able to show to the society and the users that this is safe, and then they are able to adopt and to use the new technologies. So it's not about this technology or that technology. It's really about to get it right as a system from the vehicle infrastructure and the users. And that is the big challenge here that we need to manage.
Okay, Mr. Johannes Springer, then, do you also agree with that it's not just about technology, but you have to get the technology right?
Yeah, to get the technology right and to be neutral on the technology, because, we are talking today about certain technologies. Hannah has expressed her wishes from 5 years ago. She wanted to have the automated driving vehicles very quickly on the roads and was a bit disappointed. So that was 5 years ago. So now we are in 2022, and we even already talked today about 6G, you know. So I think we cannot say that a certain technology will solve that issue. We need to have always a technology neutral approach, and it will always a combination of various technologies, whether it comes from sensors, whether it comes from connectivity technologies, or whether it comes from several other technologies which are relevant for supporting this kind of cooperation, what Riyad has said. You know, cooperation is for us also a very important topic when we are talking about traffic. Traffic is not an isolated issue where everybody is maximizing its own efficiency. That does not work. So we need to come always from a cooperative perspective to it. But we still need to face the challenge, the big challenge, that we need to take into consideration always a mixed traffic situation. We will have old cars, we will have new cars, we will have customers who are equipped with a phone, we will have other customers who don't use a phone, we will have connected traffic infrastructure, and we don't have always connected traffic infrastructure. So that is something where we need to work with that. And we need to define exactly the operational design domain and in all these different flavors, that a certain degree of automation can be fulfilled under certain conditions. And I think that's the important issue.
Let me just interject there, because we are sort of running out of time then. So that people can understand where the technology is at and how safe these cars can be on the roads, especially you know, mixing with, you know, human-driven cars. What is the technology like when it comes to the AI communicating, when it comes to the potential of it having an impact or an accident in a high sort of traffic situation? What technology is in place now? Just, you know, talk us through that a little bit if you can.
Is it for me, the question, or?
Yes, Mr. Springer, it was for you. Yeah. So just a quick.
Okay. I didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, I think, you know, I think to connect as much as possible everybody and everything on the road. That is a very important topic. And as we are as a 5G Automotive Association, bringing the telco industry and the automotive industry together, we are working exactly into this direction. So to connect everything, to exchange information as much as possible, and to increase the situational awareness for the different traffic participants, that is a very essential point. As I said, not only for the vehicles, we should not only limit the discussion to automated driving vehicles. If we make public investments into road infrastructure, into smart road infrastructure, also the pedestrians, also the cyclists, also the motorcyclists should get a benefit out of it. And to bring smart connectivity into this road infrastructure is definitely something which is a very important key factor for us.
Okay, well, panelists, unfortunately, we've had this fantastic debate, but we have now run out of time. I hope, of course, that everyone watching has enjoyed what you've heard, what's been discussed. So unfortunately, we are going to have to leave it here. But Gert van der Linden, Henna Verkunen, Stefan Dix, Dr. Maciej Wilgos, Johannes Springer, and of course, Mark Boris, Andrea Janik. Thank you so much, of course, for being a part of this absolutely fantastic discussion. And of course, to everyone who has been watching online, to all of you who sent in questions, you know, we really hope that you've really been given a flavor of the debate surrounding autonomous vehicles and their reality. I'm Mariam Zadi, and you've been watching a Euractiv debate supported by Alma Mater Europaea. Take care and bye-bye.